Cool. Well, thanks everyone for being here. And thanks Subak for making this show happen uh, uh, and for just being great while it was postponed and giving us this platform to show our work. But I'm Lauren Krukowski. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I've been living in Brooklyn since 2012, so just over 8 years. I'm from Waconia, Minnesota. So grew up in Minnesota, went to school in Madison, Wisconsin, studied painting there. I lived in Minneapolis for 2 years before moving to New York. But yeah, I'm trained as a painter. The last 3 years, I've really been diving into printmaking, and that's changed my practice in a lot of ways. I still definitely consider myself a painter, but learning the different print techniques has really changed the way that I work. Over the last year, I've completely departed from painting on canvas entirely. And instead I'm making collages with paper and silk. And all the papers and silks are hand painted and hand cut. In full spectrum, I have works in 2 different sizes: a small postcard size that's 7 by 5 inches, and a size that's a bit larger, 16 by 12 inches. The small works I made in the fall of 2019, and there's 5 of them in the show, but I made about, I want to say like 20 to 30 of them at the time. And the larger 16 by 12 works were made in January 2020. So they were all made prior to the COVID outbreak in New York. My practice is really driven by a fascination with color and just a love of color. I love playing with color relationships and creating new color relationships. You'll see in the slideshow, I often repeat a composition with different, like here, for example, use the same composition, but use different color relationships. And I do that to just kind of push the composition further and to kind of play with different lighting scenarios within the work. And yeah, just kind of see how far I can go with it. All the papers and silks I prepare in advance. That allows me to make selections, color selections, intuitively and reactively in the moment. And it usually happens really quickly. Collage offers an immediacy that, for me at least, painting didn't. I'm able to see right away the color relationships and how they come together, and also play around kind of until I find the balance that I'm looking for within the work. And I can see how the colors bounce off of each other and create space within the work. All these works have quite a few layers of paper and silk too. And I really like working with the silk because the weave of the fabric allows some transparency. So you can see the color showing through below it. And the papers that I use too are fairly thin. So depending on what color they're painted, they also can be quite transparent. So I like to play with that transparency in the works to create kind of some surprising moments when you're looking up close. And also the works, because they're layered, they also have a light relief, which I find just to be a nice moment when you're looking at them closely. It doesn't show through as well in the online images, but when you see them in physical space, you can see that light relief in them. But in these works, for the full spectrum show, I used a lot of bold primary colors, pastels, and some neutrals as well. And I really wanted the colors to be bold, some of them to be vibrating, but I wanted them to balance in a way that created kind of calm, motionless images. And all the works in the show reference architectural space. I started working primarily with architectural imagery in 2013 or 2014 with my previous series that was titled On Knowing What I Think I Might Want. In that series, I worked on until 2019, until I started making works for the full spectrum show. But that series is really tied to the series in a lot of ways. And in that series, I was thinking a lot about insecurity and uncertainty that comes from kind of being in between or moving through difficult transitions in life, or really just kind of any transition. But the feeling of like working through something or working towards something that you're not certain how long you'll be working towards it or if you'll reach it. At the time that I was making that previous series, I was going through uncertainty in my own life. And yeah, I guess just making that series was like a meditative way for me to work through those feelings and find peace and even beauty within them. I was interested in depicting kind of the anxiety of being in that in-between space, but also finding beauty and opportunity within those kind of moments. And I think for me, that really shows through in the work, in the color. And I knew I wanted to depict that feeling through abstraction, using recognizable imagery as kind of a starting point, but pushing it to the point that it's kind of like teetering on the edge of being completely abstract, creating somewhat recognizable forms, but also really ambiguous ones. And I thought a lot about like creating a visual equivalent of like the feeling of searching for a word that's stuck on the tip of your tongue, like just not being able to fully grasp it. The collages in full spectrum, they reference real actual spaces, but also imagined ones that I've just created. I take a lot of photographs going through my daily life and when I travel. A lot of the works reference shapes from these photographs, or parts of the composition come from the photographs, but the actual place or location doesn't mean a lot to me while I'm making or in the final works. I'm more just interested in finding interesting shapes and how the space works and how the shapes work within the composition. And in these works in particular, in the full spectrum show, I was really interested in creating liminal spaces that mark transitions from one area to the next. So I featured a lot of arches and doorways, windows and mirrors, places where light can change from one room to the next, or be reflected or pour in through a window. And I chose that kind of imagery to try to really get across that like in-between feeling that I was thinking about or reaching towards something. The kind of in-between spaces to me represent opportunity, choice, moving through different parts of life or different parts of ourselves. And again, I was interested in simplifying the compositions to the point that left them unclear and open to different interpretations. And I also was thinking about leaving it unclear whether the forms lead into an architectural space or if they reflect it. Kind of mentioned this earlier, but I was also thinking a lot about light when I was making these works, and how color is affected by light. And when selecting the color relationships within the work, I kind of in my own head was like thinking of different lighting scenarios that I was depicting, and thinking about the differences between different light sources. So like thinking about natural light streaming through a window, or like when you take a photograph from a dark room and the lights just kind of like pouring in and washing everything out. I thought a lot about that. Or like there's the LED technology has gotten better, but there's like first LED lights that were like really overwhelming and kind of like flickering blue light. I was thinking about like that kind of light and versus like a halogen light that is a warm yellow light, and it's like actually physically warm as well. You can feel the heat from it versus like a golden hour light. So yeah, those are just all things that I was kind of thinking about in my head when I was making these works. But yeah, I don't know, they're super fun to make. I really do just have a lot of fun making them. It's a really playful process, and with the collage, it leaves a lot of room for kind of trial and error, which I really like. And yeah, I guess my process, I spend like 2 or 3 weeks preparing papers, and just like creating a palette of things to choose from, and then spend a few months making collages. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, thanks for listening and being here. And I think that's it for me. But if you have any questions, I'm looking forward to answering them after Chris introduces his work.
All right, I guess it's my turn. Well, you know, it's interesting, which I didn't know about Lauren's work, is she is a painter becoming a printmaker, and I started off as a printmaker, always trying to become a painter. So I live in Minneapolis. I don't know if that's relevant. I came here to go to the U of M for a printmaking degree, and quickly realized that I was much more relating to the people teaching painting there. So I just forced myself to switch. And I still don't feel like I've become as good a painter as I was a printmaker, because printmaking gives you these hard lines and it's just, everything is very definite. But printmaking taught me process. And before, when I was starting to paint, I was very loose, you know, like slop and paint, which is kind of a game of luck. Is it going to look good or not? I tended to make a lot of bad decisions on how I made paintings. So with this new process, it's a lot of tape, a lot of gel. So I basically will just tape areas out, paint it. You're like, you know, maybe not. But it just sort of controls the process. So it's more like a print, like preparing a plate with every layer that goes on. And then I use a lot of the gel. I can show this more of a detail. You can see it gets to be very, very thick, I tape it up like a souffle essentially, and just pour a lot of gel on there and sort of build up these layers. It kind of like, you know, in the 70s, if anybody can remember, they had those clear super balls that had like colors sort of floating through it. It was like this perfect artificial plastic thing that I just was always really attracted to. So in these paintings, I've been trying to like just try to get that physical space with physical layers floating on top of each other, rather than using traditional shading to create depth in a painting. I'm trying to create physical depth with these new things. As far as where they come from, I tend to just kind of go with my gut. I don't have a lot of things I'm referencing. I think back to my childhood, the first time I experienced artificial flavors, you know, like the pink starburst was the best one, and like something about the color pink kind of brings me back to that, and like I'm really attracted to it. And the commentary I think that I'm playing off of is I watch a lot of TV. I find like kind of, you know, more mainstream sort of, I guess, garbage culture, for lack of a better term, sort of interesting, because it's what prevails, and being able to take all this in and then try to recycle it in a way that creates something visually appealing, rather than coming at it with a point of view. So it's more of just you know, my commentary is nothing really definite. Although you know, things will sort of accidentally happen. And I sort of let the viewer just take their own journey. You know, I usually disagree with what they think, but that's fine. And I know that's kind of open-ended, but with the newest works I did once COVID started, which pushed back the show, I started doing a lot of camouflage patterns, but with really garish colors. Because, you know, my whole thought of my experience of COVID is we're all sort of hiding out, but yet I'm noticing that everybody I know really wants to be noticed even more than they were before. So everybody's really sort of pushing hard on like, how do I still make my impression on the world, even though we're all sort of locked up waiting to see what the hell happens, because the world has gone insane. So and also sort of like the sort of militarization that seems to be happening in this terrifying way, the camouflage sort of relates with that too. So that's kind of what the new work was. Right when this all started, I took about half the paintings that I had for the show and threw them out and started over, just because I was getting more and more fascinated with this. But trying to think what else. But yeah, and as far as color relationships, I think the first time I really understood like vibration, I saw a Rothko when I was like 14, and I thought, this is stupid. It's one color. You'd see pictures of it, and then seeing it in person, it's like, wow, this thing vibrates. So I'm trying. I mean, and my ultimate goal in life is I wish I could make a painting that was one color and really worked, but I can't. It's an impossibility to actually do that well. But just trying. I'm trying to make things that vibrate, like I'll put a pink next to a green, which just automatically will create that sort of crazy separation. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at notes. I didn't practice well enough. But the other big thing for me, and why I drifted away from printmaking, was the idea of portability with the work itself and how it can create it. As much as I loved going to the print studio, I didn't love having to go somewhere. So this process, I can basically make these in my kitchen. I could make them in my backyard. It's all very non-toxic and portable, if that makes any sense. Just because I like to sort of be able to create within my normal sphere of my day. I like to, paint for 20 minutes, make lunch, come back and look at it. It just sort of like having it around like a friend, rather than going somewhere. Although I do dearly miss printmaking. This is kind of the way I've been able to keep creating. But yeah, I'm not sure what else I got. Yeah, I should have. That's, I will leave it to questions, I guess. It's
It's interesting to learn that you come from a printmaking background. I didn't know that.
yeah. Oh my God, I loved it. And also I did a lot of Shinkolé,
Oh yeah.
collaging within the plates and stuff. So it's like, I wish I could put a press in my kitchen. I would still make prints. But yeah, that was 7 years of my life was.
Yeah. Yeah, the process that I use for collage is very similar to Shinkolé, but right. for a similar reason, I do have access to a print shop still, but the collages are basically Shinkolé without a press.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I have a couple of questions. Well, I have a question for each of you.
Oh.
I love that you're like, oh my God.
Oh, wow.
Lauren, I'm just curious of why you started to transition to like more of a cutout collage lamination with some painting from just purely painting. What was the impetus for that?
Yeah, there wasn't like one moment, I guess, that it changed, but I started taking printmaking classes. I took a class on Watercolor Monotype at Robert Blackburn printmaking workshop, and I worked for I was still making paintings on canvas at that time, but I was also learning this process and really enjoying the process of making watercolor monotypes. And then from there, I learned how to make Shinkolé. And I saw an artist, Shakaya Booker. She works with Robert Blackburn printmaking workshop, and she has this process in Shinkolé that these works that are just Shinkolé that I absolutely loved. So that's why I wanted to learn the process. Once I started working that way again, I was still making paintings, but spent a year also learning the Shinkle process and making those. And then, I don't know, I guess last fall, I just decided that the collage was the way I wanted to move. And I think it has a lot to do with just the works that I make have so much to do with color relationships. And in painting, you can plan for that in advance, but it takes a lot longer. And the way that I was painting, it would take maybe like a month to complete a painting. So I couldn't see how the colors were coming together as quickly as I can in collage.
No, I appreciate that a lot. I mean, the environments feel very architectural, like especially in person when you can see the layers, and purposeful. So there is this natural feeling of that it needs to be this way. I mean, I'm a process person, so, and always curious why people change the direction.
Yeah.
Of what they're doing.
I think I was also just getting bored is maybe the wrong word, but just getting frustrated maybe with the process that I was doing in painting, and this collage process just felt really fresh. And once I loved the Shinkle pieces, but once I took the press out of it, because Shinkle, it kind of, if you're not familiar with it, you're putting it through a press, so it kind of flattens everything to the front of the image. So there's not really any relief to it at all. It almost looks like it could be like an inkjet print coming out because it's so flat. But with the collages, everything's kind of pushed to the back of the image. Mm-hmm. So there is some light relief, and you can see where the different papers are overlapping. And I don't know, when I made the first one, I was like, oh, like, I love this. There's something about it that I just was really attracted to, both in the process and in the result.
Yeah, no, it really works, especially for like the light play, as you talk about frequently, is truly predominant within these pieces. There is a sort of glow, like a Rothko vibration, it was like a beautiful remembrance, just because that is a perfect example of needing to see a work in person, because Rothko especially, it's like when you see an image of it, you're like, oh, that's fine. But then,
is the gallery open today to go see these?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I can like get.
That's why
Carolyn,
I'm sitting here with a mask. But
Awesome.
otherwise, I wouldn't have a mask on.
I want to experience this like real life.
I know, thank you, Chris and Lauren, for being game to try this.
Of
Like,
course.
we try to show this online, but it's been awesome because they are paintings, because I think paintings have to be in person viewed, but we have been able to get people to experience them somewhat in different formats besides just on the wall, which is gonna be the struggle. So,
and I will say that the most comment that I get, and Carolyn probably can attest to that, is your guys' exhibition brings people joy. Like, literally, like, they just are like, oh.
It's so, yeah, people are so happy. I mean, partially, I think the colors, I think, Chris, what you were saying about it, thinking about your childhood, I get that childhood, those balls, like, it makes me feel nostalgic and kind of happy. Lauren's, yours are so peaceful, like the light and the glow and looking through those arches and like, am I in a window? And they're really soothing. But also, I think seeing abstract art right now is such a treat for people because it just gives you a space to just look at it. It does not shouting a thing at you necessarily. And I've had a couple people say that too. So it's been interesting to hear. it's always fun to hear what people think, but
Yeah.
this show definitely people really enjoy looking at.
And then gravitating towards process with Chris, what brought
Listen,
you?
she looks like she's crazy.
All right, we're just gonna mute that. Maybe I do look like I'm crazy. I don't know. So when you decided to start making your souffles, like what was your impetus to create? And I already kind of get like some of it, the artificiality, a lot of the content of what inspired you, but there is, and sorry to have to say this, but it's true, this very like lickable candy
Yeah,
quality.
exactly. Yeah.
And so what were you feeling when you were like, that's it, that's what I'm doing?
You know, I think, yeah, it should have that lickable, like, is this poison or is this okay? Like, it looks delicious, you know, like a cake, the Supermom's bakery at Super America, like the way they'd airbrush that frosting and it would trick your brain, and it's bright pink. It tastes bright pink, but it just tastes like sugar. I just have always loved like that vivid, you know, color, just cadmium colors, cobalts, all the poisonous stuff. I don't know, it does something to me. And I think it does kind of bring me back to like being a kid and packaging design, like the original Skittles wrapper. And then the first time you ate a bag of Skittles, you're like, holy shit, what just happened to my brain? Weirdly, these are the things that inspire me. I know it's not probably the most crucial message to be putting out in the world right now, but that's kind of where I'm at. But
no, I think actually there should be some time for
but I've been chasing this for a while to get that like purity of color, of that like just hard, like almost like packaging design kind of color. And being that I paint in acrylic, it's hard. Like you said, when you see a Rothko in person, it's oil, and it's, you know, it was a very unhealthy person from being around all that, but it's beautiful. Like, and so I think I've been trying different materials, and acrylic has just gotten so much better. And the floating things in the gel, I just tend to I don't mix colors anymore. I mean, I mix all my colors from primaries, but on the paintings, one color goes down at a time, another layer of gel, just to try to keep that purity of that, like, wow, this looks like a beautiful cake from outer space or something. I don't know.
No, that's great. There's actually been a lot of questions as to your process, because they didn't know if you were layering or if you painted and then just poured.
Yeah, I'll first get, like, I've been really loving the ampersand clay board because it's just resists. It's totally not porous whatsoever. So you can get perfect lines if you want to draw on it. But I'll tape up the sides like a souffle, pour a bunch of gel on it. First layer is always gel only. And then I'll just do a lot of tape, lay one color, pour another layer, next day, paint, pour, paint, pour. So it's like, because I want the things to be floating within. Like, so if you, at some of them that I've kind of pulled it off, you can see the shadows being formed by the shapes floating in the gel, to create, you know, some sort of artificial depth.
Well, no, and that's fascinating because that's another thing that you and Lauren have in common. The outcome is completely different, but you both depend upon the aspect of layering to sort of create this depth.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a good result. It's a handsome show.
But yeah, I think the layering and creating physical depth is like, I'm trying to get, it's all mid-tone essentially. So if there wasn't that depth, they'd be failures, all of my paintings, I think, in this show. Because I kind of like, I took it, like flipped it on like everything, because I used to get so much shit in grad school, like, this is all mid-tone, what is this? I'm like, well, I like this. But I think after all these years, I'm starting to figure out a way to create physical depth that'll take care of that problem.
And so that brings us, because you guys are actually working a little bit differently and can't just paint over something, how much does accident versus tragedy happen in your work?
Go ahead, Lauren. I definitely have an answer for that, but
Yeah.
I've been babbling for a minute here.
Because I'm working in collage, I can actually control quite a bit because I usually have everything cut out and kind of arranged before I'm gluing anything. But the glue that I use is also water soluble. So if there is a mistake, I mean, it can't always be perfectly reversed because it sometimes damages what's underneath it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess there is quite a bit of that just built into the process that I can kind of play around, trial and error before gluing anything. But I definitely do have pieces that, like I said, I made like 20 or 30 of the small collages, and I'd say like 15 of them I was happy with, and the other ones just live in a drawer. So yeah, I don't know. I just kind of, I work pretty quickly when it comes to the collages. So I try not to be too critical in the moment. And if it doesn't work, it just doesn't work, and I move on from there. But yeah, that's also why I work in multiples too, creating different relationships with the same color relationships within the same composition to kind of see what's working and what's not working. But
Yeah, I think I've been trying to minimize accidents because it gets expensive buying this stuff. But the beautiful thing about this gel is you get a layer on it. I can tell pretty quickly if it's going to work or not. And I usually have about an hour where I could just put it under the sink and wipe that layer away. So this process has minimized a lot of accidents, which I think things have become more intentional. I started off being much more of like, you know, free-handed, like, you know, de Kooning, you know, kind of like, you know, attacking a canvas. Like the more I would attack it, the more I would screw it up. So now, yeah, it's all pretty controlled. The result, though, you know, I'm like, ooh, what if I put one more? What if I put one more? I think that's where I make mistakes, that maybe I go too far. I think the less time I spend around a painting, the less chance I have to screw it up. And that's what's great about this process, because essentially lay the tape out, put down a color, walk away, and then pour the gel. It has to dry for at least overnight. So.
My question is always, how do you know when painting is finished? Like in my personal work, I'm like, how do I know when it's finished? So when do you guys, is it like an emotional feeling, or is it a time limit? Like, what's your like, okay, finished, putting it on the wall now, the end.
My God, if we had the answer to that. Yeah, I think a friend of mine said it best. He was like, you know, you can never win with painting, you know, and I think that's true. I think I just get to a point where I'm like, I think there is some sort of a maybe emotional reaction to it, or like I'm just done, or like
exhaustion, maybe.
Yeah, exhaustion. You know, I think it's just once I know I've pushed it. If I push it, sometimes I'll get like, with this process, I'll get another layer on, and I'll go, okay, I just ruined the whole thing. So I wipe it away, and like, all right, I was already done, which is kind of a cheat. It's sort of like what I've been able to do is build in, you know, the Command Z. I can undo now, because I started to find myself at times like doing this with my hand while I'm painting, like, oh shit, no, this is a painting I can't undo, like with a click. Like I'll do that with my hand, but I think with this process I kind of can. And sometimes I just, like, one of the paintings in the show is basically just nothing but pink, just a pink square. And I just specifically said, I'm just going to do one of these. I know I'm not going to be satisfied with it, but I just want to do it. I'm going to call it done no matter what. So, you know, you put that, assign that discipline to yourself to be like, I'm calling it done.
yeah, I think that's like the question that every artist always grapples with, is like, when's the point for it to be done? With these works in particular, I'm looking for some kind of balance within the work. So I guess it's a kind of like a feeling that I'm looking for. But that being said, I just make a lot of them. And sometimes, like, I think one's really good in the moment when I'm done making it, but then it ends up being my least favorite of the bunch in like a month from after I've made them. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's something that everyone struggles with.
Yeah, like painting is like, you know, it's like a drug, but the hangover doesn't happen until like a year later, and you look at, oh God, what did I do? this is awful. Or sometimes like, oh, that's great. What a brilliant thing.
I have a question. It's not so much process, but now both of you had planned to have the show in March. And it sounds like Chris, then you made newer work while we were like, I don't know, maybe next month.
You're right.
Lauren, so Chris, you've moved into this sort of camouflage, and Lauren, has your work changed over the past 6-7 months? Have you always worked at home? Did you have a studio? Like, I'm just interested, and I'm sorry that's the obvious question right now, but
Yeah, no, I think it's a valid question for
Yeah.
sure. But yeah, I've always worked from home, so I
Mhm.
actually had a pretty easy transition compared to a lot of other artists that I know. I mean, I'm already working small. I'm already working on a process that I can do on my kitchen table. So I have a studio at home. I call it a micro studio, but it's actually a closet that I've turned into a studio. So it has like 2 double doors that you open up, and there's a table and shelves and everything there that I need. So yeah, I was pretty set up already when it came to this. But I did, and I know I've spoken with a lot of other artists too. I did really struggle to make work for the first couple months. And I was making, but not really making anything I was excited about. But I had a residency this summer, which was supposed to start in March. And we did start in March, but it was residency from home. And then in June, it's at a print shop called Gutenberg Arts in New Jersey. But in June, we actually started going into the print shop, and it was just us 3 residents going in. So it was safe and felt fine to do. But I don't know, that experience of having a place to go that was outside of my home and like playing with processes that were new to me. I was still doing watercolor monotypes, but also started working in woodblock print, which is just like a completely new process to me. That was, I don't know, having that space to go to, and also a new process to explore, I thought was like amazing to have during this period. So the work is fairly similar still, but I was playing with new processes. But yeah, I was really grateful to have a place to go, and they have a beautiful backyard. They call it the Guten Garden. It's a community garden. So being able to get out of my small Brooklyn apartment and get into like a big workshop space and outdoor space was just like a godsend during this time for me.
Do you have any examples of the wood block prints?
I don't with me currently.
Okay.
But actually I could maybe pull it up on my phone.
And if you had it on your laptop, I could make you a co-host and you could just share your screen.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you can see through there's quite a glare, but these are pretty small, but they're very similar. Like the blocked color. This is the first time I've editioned something, so that was a process to learn. It's very difficult, but was enjoyable. But yeah, I editioned 2 prints while I was there, and I'm planning to. They were also pretty small. I think they're 6 by 8 inches, but I'm about to start another edition that's slightly larger, 16 by 12 again.
Well, and it looks like those were on Instagram. So
yeah,
everyone out there in the viewing audience, your Instagram handle?
Sure, I can put it here, but Lauren, it's just my name, lauren.krukowski.studio.
Perfect. And I think we also, if anybody just wants to go to the SUVAC Instagram, I think we tag you in the posts. So there's that too. And do you, either of you guys have any, what's going on? What's coming up next? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so if you go, yeah, so that's actually the third one. Oh, the third one is the Gutenberg space, which it's just this beautiful print workshop. They have amazing natural light, and there's these huge skylights too, right over the tables. So it was just this like absolutely wonderful space to be working. But those are on the table there, some of the watercolor monotypes that I was making, and those are with a water soluble crayon. So I draw with crayon onto newsprint and then cut the newsprint into shapes similar to how I make collages, and arrange them on a plate, and then it gets run through the press with a wet piece of paper, and the water soluble crayon then gets transferred to the wet paper.
That's nice. I like the two like subtle differences that is achieved with the process. It's really lovely.
Yeah, and this was the first print. It was kind of just like a test print to learn how to make woodblock prints, but I ended up actually liking it and editioning it.
Yeah. Oh,
but yeah, the one on the left is the woodblock edition. And I made 20 of them.
Nice.
Yeah, so they're very similar. It's layers of ink from many different wood blocks. So there's there's a subtle texture of wood grain in them, and I was using multiple wood blocks so that the grains would kind of cross each other. So there's kind of some optical illusions that happen from the layering. Yeah, and that's my little closet studio.
Yeah.
My micro studio that I love.
Nice.
A little bit crazy there because I was doing this was during the residency from home. So I was just playing around with the woodblock prints, trying to learn the process.
So Lauren, have you ever done lithography?
I haven't.
Because your work is like made for lithography. It's the most frustrating process on the planet, but this stuff as lithographs would be just mind-bending.
It's something that I definitely would love to do, but I've also heard it's incredibly challenging. So
it really doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's like,
but once you get it down, it's like, I tried for years and never really was able to do much with it, but it's like these images and the way this works, this is like made for lithography. It would be just, I mean, it's already beautiful. So I don't know if it's appropriate for me to tell you should try lithography. But,
no, it's something that's definitely on my radar and something I need to take a class and learn more about it.
yeah. Even a class, it's like it's
like alchemy.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense, but somehow it works.
Yeah.
It's like alchemy of some sort. Like.
Yeah, so having this resident, I was in this space every weekend from June through September, and that was just it was an incredible experience, and I think made even more amazing just because of the time that we're in, and being isolated and not really having a place to go other than your home. So I am very grateful for having that opportunity and feel very privileged to have had that.
And so, Chris, do you have an Instagram? Since this is kind of great because we get to see pieces. Do you have an Instagram we could go to?
Yeah, you could.
I mean, if it only has like selfies, then
I think I got some selfies in there. I probably got some stuff that I probably got some personal things in there as well. Oh, hey, I got a like. So yeah, it's mostly artwork, but there could be some random things. You can kind of tell the depth and scale of what this gel is doing. That's like a little bit foggy.
No, and I was impressed that you got the gel so clear. That the acrylic
It's an
medium.
amazing product. Oh, up there is a place in Miami called Fantasyland Learning Center. I don't know what the hell it was. Miami baffles me. But the gel, you know, there's Golden made this stuff called self-leveling gel that I tried for years, and it would craze and crack, and it was horrible. And then I saw this, it's this Liquitex thing called pouring medium, and it's totally for crafters. Like take your, you know, fake painting you bought at a thrift store, pour this on, it'll look like a painting. There's some personal pictures. Japan. But anyway, this Liquitex pouring medium dries perfectly clear, perfectly flat. It's a miracle on how, that's one in a really early stage. So I have a lot of sort of process where I actually tried to hand draw this one. It did not work. It was kind of a failure of a painting, but you can sort of see there's, you know, another color that's flat, more gel will come. And
how many layers do these works have? I'm sure each one is a little different, but
20, 30. And there's a clever video of it. I would say with a lot of these are 12 by 12, and I'll usually use about 1.5 gallons of the gel in the end. So probably about 30 layers.
30 layers.
Yeah, on some of them I would say, yeah. Like on that one, it's about 30. I mean, they're not super thick. Usually the layers are, you know, it's maybe 1/8 of an inch. But then once it dries, it does compact a little bit. So
now I'm like incredibly impressed with your patience. I think I would go berserk if I was
yeah. So these four are all
one layer and waiting.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of nice that it just sort of, it forces some control, but I usually try to get 3 or 4 going at once. And so all the work is in taping out these shapes, like making the outline of something, which is highly frustrating. And then by the time I've got that on, got a color on, poured gel, I'm like, fuck it, I got to walk away. And I'm glad to. I think I have a short attention span, and the less attention I put on a painting in one sitting, the better.
Oh, this is all really cool.
Thank you. Then yeah, these are all the new kind of camouflagey sort of things I've been playing with. It was initially supposed to be white on white camouflage to see if I could make the shapes actually float enough where you wouldn't have to have any color, just be outlines, but it just was a total flop.
So do you guys, either of you, have anything to plug coming up?
I have a show coming up from the Gutenberg residency. So all the residents will have a group show at Gutenberg coming up in December in New Jersey.
I got nothing. This was the only thing I had planned, you know, pre-COVID. So, you know, once in, you know, in 2025, when this is over, maybe I'll have another show.
You'll have a show.
But yeah, nothing planned. I'm starting to rethink how I want to do all this again, and I want to try to get the gel about, like, if I could get it about a foot thick.
I dare you.
I know.
I dare you.
That's the next goal. Although I gotta figure out where I can acquire enough of this gel and how the hell I'm gonna afford it.
No, I want to see that. It almost sounds like that could be in the Guinness Book of World Records.
The most gel.
Sponsor you.
Does that exist anymore?
I
think so.
Yeah. No, you should get the gel coat to sponsor you. Be like,
I know. I was, you know, there was a painting professor who I was really loved at the U, who I'm sure a few of you have been there know. And he seemed to be sponsored by Golden. And I remember one day he came to my studio wearing a Golden like tracksuit, and I was like, you're like sponsored. It's like sports painting.
Wait, who was that?
Clarence.
Oh, it was Clarence,
Wow.
of course. I'm like, I'm like, man, I was just trying to think who would be wearing a tracksuit.
Yeah, well, it was just like the top, you know, and it was like golden, like a golden like tracksuit top.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I just immediately imagined like a velvet.
No. It was
velour
not velvet. It was not
tracksuit.
velvet. It was not velvet.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing all the work with us today.
Yeah,
Of course.
thank you very much.
Nice.
Thanks for having us and
And
for
then-
listening.
Thank you both. We're open today till 4. Come on in on the weekends or email and I'll come meet you another time. So thank you both. Have a good day. Enjoy the weather.
Yeah.
Thanks, you
Bye.
too. Bye.